Welcome to video 2 of Genetics, the Code Broken. In this video, we're going to be looking at multiple alleles and inheritance patterns, looking at blood groups of both the ABO and the rhesus type. And then, just like before, you're going to be able to solve some problems comparing the inheritance of these groups. Remember when we talk about an allele, they are different forms of a gene that influences one characteristic. And therefore, each individual can have two alleles of a particular gene, one on each of the homologous chromosomes. And these usually come one from each of their parents. When we talk about multiple alleles, we're talking about when more than two alleles influence one trait. So one allele is usually dominant to a series of recessive alleles, whereas when we looked at alleles before, we just had one recessive allele. And these recessive alleles can show varying degrees of dominance over each other. The example which we're going to use is rabbit coat color, and coat color is controlled by 4 alleles. Depending on the combination of alleles will depend on what color fur the rabbit does have. So there is the agouti, which is grey fur, chinchilla, which is grey fur with black flecks, Himalayan, which is white fur with black marking, and then there's albino, which is white fur with the pink eyes. And we can see here that agouti is dominant over chinchilla, which is dominant over Himalayan, which is dominant over albino. And then we can see on the right hand side the allele combinations which will produce those 4 coat colors. And we can see here how there are varying degrees, albino being the rarest combination of these alleles. When we look at blood groups, we know that there are 4 blood groups which are most common. So there's A, B, AB, and O. And the way in which these are inherited is by a combination of these genes which do produce these blood types. And these blood grouping systems code for proteins that can be detected on the surface of red blood cells. So there are 4 groups and there are 3 alleles. So we can see the different combinations based on the phenotype or the blood group that is shown. We can see the gene combination which produces those types. So we can see here that depending on which type you are will depend on what antigens are present on the surface of your erythrocytes or your red blood cells. And we can see here that this is important for us to understand in terms of blood donation and making sure that in fact there are these antibodies which will are present in the body, which allows these antigens to be on the surface of red blood cells, which develops these blood types. The second factor that is on the presence of blood cells is what we call the rhesus or Rh factors. And these are based on the presence or absence of a second type of protein on the red cell. So every person can have either a rhesus protein, so they can be positive, or they might not have a rhesus protein, which therefore they are negative. So for a person who is negative for the rhesus protein, if the rhesus protein is in their blood, it is detected as foreign and triggers the formation of antibodies. It is coded for by 3 alleles. So we've got R1, R2, and then the lowercase r. And these alleles result in the presence of the protein, and the presence of R1 and R2 are dominant over lowercase r. So we can see here for a person to be rhesus positive, they can have the R1, they can be homozygous for R1 or R2, or they can have R1 and R2, or we can see here R1 and the lowercase r, and we can see here that the only way a person can be rhesus negative is by having 2 of the lowercase r's. And we can see here that they have, depending on whether they are Rh positive or not, will depend on whether they have these antibodies, which is really important for us to understand, especially for parents during birth, and we will investigate these further during class. Thank you for watching video 2. Make sure you tune in for video 3.